Hi everyone, I'm Jackie Grady from Grady Legal, and thank you for tuning in to Sick Degrees of Separation. I am coming to you from the home offices of Grady Legal, and I want to talk to you about the passed legislation last night called the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. This is an act to help employees get through this crazy time that we're all living in. So let me go over some key points. This does not apply to employers with over 500 employees and does not apply to our healthcare professionals or emergency first responders. The law does state that there is an exception for employers with less than 50 employees, but those exceptions have not been really spelled out, and we are expecting to see that kind of clarified in some federal regulations in the hours, days, and weeks to come. This law goes into effect starting April 2nd, 2020, and will last until December 31st, 2020. Again, I would expect some of that to change as this situation is ongoing, and we can expect to see some fluctuations in outbreaks over the course of the next several months. I would not be surprised to see this extended beyond 2020 and possibly into 2021. But let's get into it. Okay, so the Family Medical Leave Act has been substantially altered. It lowers the eligibility requirement from 12 months to just 30 days prior to leave. This is huge because it's going to capture a lot more employees. This provides this emergency FMLA provides 12 weeks of protected leave for someone to care for a child under the age of 18 years if their school is closed or if child care is unavailable due to the current crisis. Again, that's another big category that's never been covered before under the Family Medical Leave Act. The unpaid emergency FMLA is reduced from 14 days to 10 days. It used to be that the employee would have 14 days of unpaid leave, but they could use their vacation days, sick days, or paid time off. That amount now has been reduced from 14 days to 10 days. Employees can still use their paid time off, vacation days, sick days, what have you. The employer must pay full-time employees up to $200 per day, and the employer must make reasonable attempts to return the employee to an equivalent position upon their return. I suspect that this is going to be an issue in the weeks and months to come as the economics of what's going on impacts our smaller businesses throughout the country, and whether or not there are going to be equivalent positions when those employees return. There's also a provision in here for employer paid sick leave. This applies in the following situations. The employee is subject to quarantine. A healthcare provider has advised the employee to self-quarantine because of COVID-19. The employee is experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and is seeking medical help. That's really important. We can't have employees just calling in saying, hey, I got a fever, got a little bit of a cough. They actually have to be seeking medical care. Or there obviously is a medical diagnosis of COVID-19. It also applies if a person is caring for an individual subject to quarantine or an isolation order from a healthcare provider. This is a big change from the House bill that was being discussed over the weekend. That was limited if you had to care for a family member. Now it's expanded to care for any individual. And then the final provision is if you're caring for a child if the school is closed or there's no child care available due to the crises. And then there is sort of a catch-all with the Secretary of Health and Human Services decides that there's some other needs. So what this requires is that employees must pay full-time employees 80 hours of paid sick leave at their regular rate for employees who are subject to quarantine, who have to self-quarantine because of COVID-19, that are experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and seeking medical care, and have received a medical diagnosis of COVID-19. Otherwise, an employer must pay 2/3 of the full-time rate if if the employee is caring for an individual subject to quarantine or an isolation order, or if the individual is home caring for a child if the school is closed. There are caps on this. It is $511 a day for those who are subject to the quarantine. It is $200 per day if someone is staying home to care for someone else, or if their child is home because school is closed. If you have part-time employees, then you take the average number of hours that are worked for a 2-week period you would be required to pay those part-time employees for that 2-week period. Also, at the employee's request, the employer must pay 80 hours of mandated emergency paid sick leave instead of the 10-day unpaid leave under the emergency FMLA. That is not arbitrary or subject to interpretation. That is a must. So, what's in it for the employers for doing this? Well, they can get tax credits. They get a tax credit against the employer portion of their Social Security taxes. Those are paid quarterly. So, if you have incurred wages as a result of this provision and those wages exceed your Social Security taxes, then you can apply that against that portion. If you owe less wages than you would on your Social Security taxes, you would still be paying your Social Security taxes. Another provision in this bill is regarding COVID-19 testing. It requires that private health plans to provide diagnostic testing and related services to employees and their covered dependents without any cost-sharing provisions such as deductibles, co-payments, or co-insurance. This provision applies to diagnostic testing, in-person doctor's visits, as well as telehealth and facility costs. Also, it mandates there would be no prior authorizations required for this COVID-19 testing. So, that's where the nuts and bolts of it. There are a lot of little nuances in this bill. It was just signed into effect last night by President Trump. So a lot of us are still trying to digest this and parse through all the provisions. I would expect there to be substantial changes, in the days and weeks to come as this pandemic unfolds here in the United States. Of course, if you have any questions, you can always email me at Jackie, JACKIE, at GradyLegal.com. You can leave a comment below. Please subscribe to the video because we will be updating what's happening with the current status of these laws as this pandemic continues. And, please stay well, wash your hands, thank your healthcare providers. We are a little disappointed to see that healthcare workers and our first responders are not covered by this because they are obviously on the front lines. And because this is limited to employees less than 5 or companies with less than 500 employees, it's really going to impact the smaller local community type providers, your local primary care physicians and healthcare professionals in that sense. So please thank your healthcare responders, your doctors, your nurses, all of those on front lines, and keep your distance and stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon. Hi, Mom and Dad.